1, Unit 5 of Mass Communication. It deals with different models of communication. It's a quite important chapter. Here in this chapter, we have to know about definition of communication model and different types of communication model like a linear transition model, interaction model, transaction model, then Aristotle or rhetoric model of communication, Laswell's communication model, then Shannon and Weaver's model of communication, then Berlow's model of communication, Frank Dunn's helical communication model, then George Gerbner's model of communication, then Wesley and MacLean model of communication, and above all, the Indian model of communication. So it's a quite important chapter, and there are many questions may be asked from this chapter regarding 5 marks questions, just like describe Wesley and MacLean model of communication, or how Wesley and MacLean model of communication is different from that of Gerbner's and George Gerbner's model of communication, or compare and contrast between Frank Dunn's helical model of communication and Berlow's model of communication. So whether whatever the question may be, you have to understand the concept behind each model of communication. So let's go through the chapter. First question, define communication model. A communication model is a conceptual framework that describes the process of communication between a sender and a receiver. So, communication model is a framework, a theoretical framework that describes the process of communication that happened between a sender and receiver. The model typically includes components such as usual, sender, message, channel, receiver, feedback, or noise or barriers that may impact in the communication process. As always, already we have told about this. So, a communication model already includes sender, receiver, message, channel, then feedback, and the noise or the barriers related to the model of communication or the communication process. Communication model provide a visual representation, a visual diagrammatic representation and theoretical understanding of how information is shared, helping to identify the possible breakdowns and improve overall communication effectiveness. So, a communication model provides a visual representation, just like in this case, see, it's a visual representation of communication model. So, a communication model provides a visual representation as well as a theoretical understanding behind how the information is shared and helping to identify the potential breakdowns or helping to identify the barriers that affect the communication effectiveness. Okay? Did you got it? Did you understand? Did you
Yes,
understand?
madam.
Yes, okay.
Yes,
Then,
ma'am.
so what you basically understand is communication model is a theoretical framework that describes about the process of communication. It includes sender, message, receiver, channel, then feedback, noise or barriers. All these things are visually represented in a position, and it is theoretically well explained. Through this visual representation and theoretical understanding, we can able to break down the barriers and improve the effectiveness of communication. That is what it is said in this communication model. Abhijit, did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then, first of all, linear transmission model. Linear transmission model. Linear transmission model of communication is a simplistic representation of communication process. It is the basic symbol representation process, that is sender, receiver, message model. Okay. It reviews communication as one-way flow of information from sender to receiver. And in this model, the sender encodes the message, which is then transmitted through the chosen channel, such as a speech or writing. For example, our newspaper is a mode of communication, but here the sender writes about a particular message and it is transmitted through printing, and we encodes the message by reading the newspaper. But we can't provide any kind of feedback to that kind of communication. So that kind of communication is termed as linear transmission model of communication. Okay, in linear transmission model of communication, no feedback is possible. The receiver then decodes the message to understand its meaning. This model does not account for feedback or interaction between the sender and receiver. Nor does it consider noise or barriers that may affect the transmission. Here, the barriers or communication or the noise of communication is very least. And one of the limitation of linear transmission model is does not provide any kind of feedback. And here, the sender provides a message, and message is transmitted through channel like speech or writing, and that speech or the writing is decoded by the receiver. Okay, limitation is they does not provide any kind of feedback. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Then interaction model of communication incorporates feedback and context in the communication. So maybe a question arises, compare and contrast between linear transmission model and interaction model of communication. So in linear transmission model, they does not provide any kind of feedback. But here in this section, the interaction model of communication, they provide a particular context and a feedback. That is the first and foremost difference. Okay, in interaction model of communication, it incorporates feedback and context into the communication model or the communication process. Here in this model of communication, the sender encodes a message and transmits it through the channel. Okay, while the receiver decodes the message. However, the feedback plays a critical role or crucial role, allowing the receiver to respond, providing the information to the sender. For example, while we are calling for someone else or our friend, we send a message to them. Okay, not at all calling or even texting the message. Okay, when we are texting a message on WhatsApp, then the friend receive that message via internet or the telephone line, and he just responded to the message. That response is a feedback. Okay, so here the feedback is obtained, and here that kind of model, that kind of basic model is called interaction model of communication. Here in interaction model of communication, the sender encodes a message and transmits it through the channel, while the receiver decodes the message. However, feedback plays an important role in this kind of communication, allowing the receiver to respond, providing information to the sender. But in the case of a newspaper situation, or in the case of reading a book or reading a critical work, a printed work, it is the possibility of responding to such a situation immediately is less compared to the digital era. In this model emphasizes the importance of two-way communication and recognizes that meaning is co-created through mutual understanding and interaction between the communicators. So interaction model provides that in order to understand the meaning of a communication, mutual understanding between the communicators have to be provided. Otherwise, there is a gap created. So, in order to relieve the gap, we have to co-create, we have to understand the message, and we have to provide feedback, and thereby mutual understanding and interaction between the communicators. Only through the two-way communication, we have to interact easily and effectively. Okay, did you understand?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Abhijit, you are not, I think you are not sure about it. I think so. Do you have any
നോ
doubt
നോ
regarding?
എനിക്ക് ഫീവറാണ് അതുകൊണ്ടാ.
Okay. A kind of sleepiness is in your voice. Oh, okay. Oh,
ആ വോയിസ് കുറച്ച് ഡള്ളാണ്.
oh, it's okay. Then transaction. Can we move on to the next section?
Ma'am.
Okay. Transaction model. Transaction model of communication is a complex and interactive view of communication process that emphasizes the simultaneous role of both the sender and receiver. Here, none of the sender or the receiver give due importance. They both are giving due importance. None of them have dominant. none of them have dominant in this section. Both are important in transaction model of communication. In this model of communication, in this model, communication is seen as a transactional exchange where both parties are not just senders or receivers, also mutually influence each other. The model acknowledges that communication is a continuous process that involves encoding and decoding messages, feedback, and presence of noise or the barriers. It highlights the dynamic nature of communication with both verbal and non-verbal cues playing a significant role in conveying the message. The transaction model recognizes that communication is a joint effort where both parties contribute to interpretation and understanding of the message. In order to understand the context of what do you mean by transaction model, you just think about a group discussion. Okay, in a group discussion, all the participants have due importance. None of them have dominant. None of them are submissive. So for a successful group discussion, all the participants have to interact simultaneously and in an equal way. So messages are communicated, messages are received. So there is a process of communication, the to and fro process of communication happened between the communicators or the sender and receiver. Okay, and here all the participants are not just senders or receivers, they mutually influence each other. If anybody is suppressed or anybody is dominant, the mutual understanding doesn't happen. Okay, if mutual influence happened only, all the individuals are equally participate each other. Okay, that is the example for transaction model of communication. So we have to go through each session. Transaction model of communication is a complex and interactive way of communication process. Interactive means a group of people interact with each other that emphasizes simultaneous role of sender and receiver. In this model of communication, it is seen as a transactional exchange where both parties, means all the group participants, are not just senders or receivers, but in addition to it, they influence each other by exchanging their ideas, by exchanging their knowledge, and by absorbing others' ideas. The model acknowledges that communication is a continuous process that involves encoding and decoding messages, feedback, and presence of noise of barriers. For example, if anybody stop the conversation and if they have any kind of barrier related to a further conversation or further content idea, there is a barrier occur. Okay, for a successful communication, all persons are equally involved in the process of group communication. In this kind of communication, it highlights the dynamic nature of communication with both verbal and non-verbal cues plays a significant role in conveying the message. Verbal and non-verbal cues means our own verbal messages and gesturing and all other things. Here, this transaction model recognizes that communication is a joint effort where both parties contribute to interpretation and understanding of the message. Okay. Did you understand? Can we move on to the next session?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Then Aristotle's rhetoric or the communication model. Okay, it is a basic communication theory. And Aristotle's rhetoric provides an early communication model that focuses on public speaking, consisting of 5 components: the speaker, the message, then the audience, the occasion, and the effect. Okay, it consists of 5 key components. It is the basic mode of communication. It consists of 5 components, that is the speaker, the message that is the speech, then the mode, the audience, then the occasion, and the effect that produced in the communication. Aristotle categorized communication as both an art and technique and emphasized the speaker's ability to persuade the audience. So he considered communication as an art. It is a art. Communication is a process of rhetoricity. How can we communicate? How can we politely manipulate others through our own communication, through our own words and language? So he considered communication as an art, and it is a way of technique that emphasizes the speaker's ability to persuade audience. നമുക്ക് ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷൻ വഴി ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുന്നത്, പെർസ്വേഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുന്നതാണ് അദ്ദേഹം വിചാരിച്ചത്. സോ ഹി കൺസിഡേർഡ് കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷൻ ആസ് എ ഫോം ഓഫ് ആർട്ട് ആൻഡ് ടെക്നിക്. He acknowledged that the same message could have different effects based on audience and occasion, and thus the message should be adapted to suit them. So, for a same message created different emotions or different impact in different audience. So, he acknowledged that same message could have different effects based on the audience and the occasions, and thus message should be adapted to suit them. For a elevated society or higher status society, they have their own humorous sense and they have humorous messages. Okay, maybe that kind of humorous messages is well known interpreted or well known understood in a low class society. For a low class society, they have their own humorous styles and humorous occasions, and maybe the high class society considered these kind of low class societies humorous as a third class jokes. Okay, that is the difference between the messages that conveyed in different kinds of audience. Okay, ഈ റെക്ടറിക് എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ അറിയാമല്ലോ. റെക്ടറിക് മീൻസ് നമ്മൾ പ്രഭാഷണം ചെയ്യാന്ന് പറയും. ഓക്കെ, അന്നേരം അരിസ്റ്റോട്ടിൽ പറയുന്നത് പ്രഭാഷണം എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു കലയാണ്. ഇപ്പോഴും അങ്ങനെ തന്നെയാണ്. റെക്ടറിക്സിറ്റി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഒരു കലയാണ്. ഹി കൺസിഡർ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് എൻ ആർട്ട് ആൻഡ് ടെക്നിക്. സോ വി ഹാവ് ടു പ്രാക്ടീസ് ദിസ് സ്പീച്ച് ഓഫ് ആർട്ട്, ആൻഡ് we through going through as a speaker we have to convey the message. So even the message has different kinds of impact in different kinds of audience. So first of all we have to identify the audience, then we deliver the message, and and in order to deliver the message we have to know what kind of impact we have to create in that kind of audience. So according to the impact created by the audience, we deliver the message to that particular audience. Did you understand?